The hardest part of fighting these corporations is how isolated they make you feel. But through this experience, we've discovered that we're not alone, that we have a huge network of friends, neighbors, and just people throughout the country who support us in everything that we're doing. I think if I were to wrap our story up into a classic 3-part plot line, I would start it with a way to illustrate a lot of people who thought they knew how the world worked. I was perhaps mistakenly, I was hoping for a little bit more compassion, and obviously I should have known better.
U.S. Marshals jumped out with automatic rifles, stone cold face, didn't talk to us. I couldn't reach out to them. I was trying to say we're peaceful protesters, we're not trying to interfere with the work. But it was like you were under military occupation, and it was a family and a group of people that was standing there with them for against eminent domain of a property that they hadn't even been compensated for, which is their constitutional right. And this is how they treated U.S. citizens.
I might have been standing out there. I might have been standing out there with my AR-15 or my AK-47 and stuff, and say, "This is my property."
Yeah.
And some of you are gonna die before you get my property. You want no.
I was genuinely scared that someone would get shot that day for no good reason. We weren't attempting to stop them. We were not standing in their way. We were not being violent or threatening or scary. We were holding signs and making maple syrup, and they brought guns.
You know, they go in there and they cut all these trees down. They don't have any permits. They have no permits to build the pipeline. But they cut the trees anyway. They figured it's a government pipeline that's going to go right on through, and if you get in the way, we'll take your land and we'll roll over you like a steamroller and we'll just put it right in anyway. And then New York stops them dead in their tracks, and here it is years later, they've done nothing. They've done nothing.
I've never supported the Second Amendment for the purposes of defending your home until that moment, when I realized there might come a day where I would have to consider defending my home. God, I've never made the argument for might is right before until I watched that happen. And I wonder how much different this would be if that company knew that they couldn't have brought armed guards. If they had to do it the same way I have to do it, by yelling and holding signs. If they didn't have that power, how much different would this be? My dad started making maple syrup probably about 10 years ago, though we'll argue to the end of our days about exactly when. I only really got into it in the last couple of years when I came home to protest a pipeline, started helping him with the making maple syrup, and realized I absolutely love doing it and I wanted to keep going. And I think he would have quit a couple years ago if I hadn't told him to buy more equipment and keep it going. Making maple syrup has been for me a great way to stay connected to my home because I travel so much for work and I'm not here very often. It's such a geographically tied thing. We can't make it anywhere else. And it really allows me a chance to see, the benefit of the land that we have, the land that's around us, stay tied to this community, and take something really amazing from an area that has been pretty devastated by a lot of industries in the past couple of years. This case and our experience with eminent domain has made me absolutely certain that nothing is safe from someone who has enough money. Because the reason that pipeline companies are able to use eminent domain is not out of public necessity. It's because they can pay for lobbyists and lawyers. And the entire system, the entire judgment on whether or not they should be allowed to use eminent domain really comes down to who can afford a better lawyer. So it's really opened my eyes to the fact that economic inequality is really what determines how safe you are from eminent domain and how safe you are from someone being able to take something you thought was yours. And I think that the intention of our Constitution and the intention of eminent domain law was to avoid that, but it has been vastly perverted and misused. I have a very close family. We're very connected. God, we love each other to the point where it doesn't matter how much we disagree. And talking about this pipeline, talking about this eminent domain issue, talking about how we're going to deal with it has been the only time I've ever argued with my family. It's not because we disagree, it's because the level of misunderstanding and misinformation is so high that most of the time we don't even know what we're talking about with each other. Mother's siblings have different levels of understanding of what's going on based on the information that they've been given versus what they've heard in the media, and none of us actually has any idea of how this is supposed to work because everything we've ever heard about how eminent domain works has turned out to be not true. My family's property was purchased by my grandparents in the 50s. My mother and her 4 siblings grew up there. My one aunt, my Aunt Matsi, still lives there. She's lived there her entire life. And more than anyone, it is her home. And she can't look at the trees. She's never walked the corridor since they were cut. And the whole time they were there cutting, she never stepped outside. If you've never watched trees being cut down, it's hard to watch to begin with, and it's particularly hard when they're yours. The first time she saw photos of the damage that had been done was at her deposition, where the Constitution Pipeline lawyers made her look at them to try to identify them.
This window is my window on the world, but the world couldn't see me, and now it can. They can walk that line anytime. They can go on that pipeline and look down at me, and it's all opened up. I don't like that. I like my privacy. I'm a very private person.
They're cutting that right away, right up behind the house where she lives, and can look out her picture window and watch those trees falling. And that was a horrible thing. Those trees coming down, slamming into the ground, one after another, chainsaws buzzing away. My sister could not do that.
When they came through to cut, I had to leave. While they were cutting, I had to leave. I couldn't stand the thought of them cutting the trees. I went to my sister's for a couple days. And in truth, I've only walked up, she can make me cry. I've only walked up there once since they've cut it because I can't look at it. I just can't look at the mess they made and the trees being gone, and it's so open, and now the prickle bushes are all open. It's just so different, and I don't even walk up the hill anymore. I don't want to be on anymore.
I think it's too much to expect anybody to handle at some point, because that has been the bulk of our experience, navigating this world where even our lawyers have no idea what's coming next because it's all being made up as we go along.
The thing about them is after the trees were cut, 2 weeks later was when they found out they weren't going to be able to get into New York State right away, and everything stopped. The crews left, The people left. They pulled out their access roads. My husband ran into somebody on the property a couple weeks right after they cut the trees and said, "Where did all your people go?" And they said, "Oh, we're all laid off. It's all, we stopped everything, all the construction, everything is stopped. Everybody's laid off. It's just 2 of us here, just, you know, tidying things up." And to think that this was after they just cut down 500 plus trees on our property, and now you're done.
This morning we've heard through the grapevine on the internet, some people that stay in touch with us, with my daughter, that Williams, one of the major contributors to the Constitution pipeline, is actually pulling out. They've lost enough money, and they're gonna lick their wounds and move on. And so I'm not sure exactly what that means to the Constitution pipeline, if they'll find other financial people to get back into it, if they'll just take it on themselves. They really don't need Williams, but it certainly is a blow to the Constitution, and it's, you know, something that's encouraging to us. So hopefully that might be the end of it.